Hey everyone, I'm really excited to bring you all on this journey through my creation of the music of the Ainur as part of my Soundscape of Eä project. Now, before we get into that, I'm just going to do a really quick explanation of my projects in case there are some folks that are new that don't know what they are. I take books like the Silmarillion, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, Wheel of Time, Game of Thrones, all that kind of stuff, and I add sound effects and music. I write my own music. I put ambient nature environments in there, and I put it all together to create a 3D immersive audio experience to go along with your reading of the book or just listening on its own, or you can even accompany it with the official audiobook, so you can put the two of those together super easily. So that's the idea behind these soundscape projects, and today we're going to be looking at the music part of that. But if you're interested, you can check out samples and everything like that of all of the projects and what the full experience is like. Now, to better guide us through this journey, we're going to kind of have some textual milestones or markers throughout the journey to kind of guide us and listen for and to really signify when certain changes happen, and then we'll talk about each one of them as we go. But I wanted to lay it all out first so that we can kind of see where we're headed and the kind of markers that we'll meet along the way. So the ones that we'll be looking for are, they sang only each alone, or but few together, declared to them a mighty theme. Then the voices of the Ainur like unto harps and flutes and pipes and trumpets, it came into the heart of Melkor. Some of these thoughts he now wove into his music. Some began to attune their music to his. The discord of Melkor spread ever wider. Raging storm as of dark waters that made war one upon another. A new theme began amid the storm. A discord of Melkor rose in uproar and contended. A third theme grew amid the confusion, and it was unlike the others, for it seemed at first soft and sweet. The one was deep and wide. The other had now achieved a unity of its own, but it was loud and vain and endlessly repeated, and it had little harmony, but rather a clamorous unison, as of many trumpets. But it seemed that its most triumphant notes were taken by the other and woven into its own solemn pattern. Then he raised up both his hands, and in one chord, deeper than the abyss, higher than the firmament, piercing as the light of the eye of Ilúvatar, the music ceased. Now, before we get into actually listening to the music, I want to talk quickly about some of the decisions and the constraints that I had to work with as I was building this piece of music. Primarily the first and most important for all of my soundscape projects, but especially this passage, is the time. All of this content needs to fit into the 8 or 9 minutes of this audiobook reading. So I need to decide when things start and finish, how long the themes are, how long transitions are to try and make them fit the flow of the reading as well as possible. That means some things have to come in a little early while others linger a little bit longer than their descriptions in the audio. Next we have the instrumentation. What instruments do I use for this? I decided to keep things simple by sticking with the choirs, string orchestras, and brass orchestras. This feels right for this world, mostly because Howard Shore so solidly planted that idea in our heads with Tolkien's work, but also because they're familiar to this concert classical style of writing, and there are a few kind of classical techniques I used and borrowed from for this writing, so following the instrumentation of that lens really does make sense for this opening. The structure. So expanding on that, we discussed the way this music is structured. The idea is quite simple. Tolkien lays things out fairly clear for us. The structure is what I would call an AAB format. We're introduced to the main theme. We have music around that theme. And we go to the second theme, which is like the first theme but raised up and seen through a little bit of a different lens. And then, as we know, we have that third theme, which is unlike the others, as the text says. And so structurally, this all makes sense when composing. It all is kind of laid out there already for us by Tolkien. Now, I also wanted to approach this piece in a bit of a kind of semi-fugue perspective. Fugues as a composition style involve layering the same melody over top of itself, but having that melody start at different times. This really creates an interesting weaving effect that I thought really worked well for the Ainulindäle. So we'll hear more of that as we listen to the examples. And then finally, we have the influence of Melkor. How far do I go with that? There needs to be a bit of creative license here to make it still bearable to listen to while also evoking what is being described. There's a lot of fun composition tricks I did to kind of evoke the language that Tolkien gave us. So now let's dive into our step-by-step process through this piece of music, and I'll kind of talk about each element as we go. So we start things off with this really simple kind of fractured melody. Some of the voices are singing, they come in and out. They don't really resolve. They don't have a full melody. It's to get that idea across that they're just kind of sparse. We haven't really kind of coalesced into Eru's main theme yet. Here we have Eru's main first theme, and it's slow, it's kind of methodical, and it's proud still and pure. I wanted to try and get a bunch of emotions across here, but the real kind of idea of this theme comes through in the next phase when we start to hear that layering of the theme, and it starts to build on itself. So this was a really, really awesome moment where things started to really kind of come together. And this is a bit of that fugue type writing that I was talking about, where the same melody, that theme that is the first theme of Iluvatar, it comes in and the different instruments start playing it, but they start playing it at different times compared to each other. And it kind of layers in and cycles through this pattern that together, layered like that off time, it really starts to create this interesting tapestry that, you can kind of hear different parts of the melody throughout, but it's more about what the idea altogether is, even though it is all just from that one musical idea, which again is this kind of whole point of this Ainulindäle. Next up, we start to hear those same themes, but it starts to have a little bit of a different color to it. It's not quite dissonance yet, it's not clashing yet, but it's a little bit of a hint that Melkor is coming, and there's a lot of description here about what Melkor is doing and his thoughts on everything. So we can't quite get to the discord yet, but it's just introducing some subtle clashing that, you can tell that something's a little bit off here. And that's the whole point of this segment, is to just start to hear that there's something that's maybe going to go wrong. Now, this is where things get really fun and really awesome, when Melkor really starts to take over. He starts to try and weave his own music into the theme. And how I kind of pull this off is, we have the original theme that is in its own key, its own musical framework. And Melkor comes in with this separate framework, and he starts kind of clashing with the original theme by playing in his own, he's got his own building blocks and he's trying to shove them in here and see if it works. And what's interesting is that all I had to do was take some of the elements of the other voices that were playing harmoniously before with Iluvatar's theme and start to change their notes so that they match Melkor's notes instead of the original notes. So we have two different kind of groups of musical notes, and one of them is Iluvatar's and the other is Melkor's, and Melkor starts to influence these notes and pull them over to his side. And so the harmony becomes more and more Melkor's group of notes than Iluvatar's. And it really kind of starts to clash, and these two groups of notes don't work very well together. And the idea is to really try and make it feel like there's weight being added, there's clashing. It's not meant to unfold this way. And so we get a lot of different kind of really low pitches and high pitches that are just kind of confused. They don't really know. Some are trying to follow the main theme, and some of them are trying to follow Melkor's theme, and we're not really sure which way to go. And so that's where this kind of phrase and passage started to head. And it was really a lot of fun to play with that, take a couple notes and move them over to Melkor's and see how that started to kind of clash and build together. And you really have to toss away the kind of accepted rules here and start to really play with just, what clashes with what and how much, because we don't want to make it, like I said, we don't want to make it too much for the listener, but we do want to get that idea across. So it was a lot of fun. Now we get to the second theme. Okay, so you'll hear throughout this kind of clashing cacophony that's happening, there's a new theme that comes through. It kind of shoots through it on the brass. And that theme is similar in shape and notation to the previous first theme. It's just in a different key. So we've kind of we've got the original rule set of notes, and then we've got Melkor's rule set, and this one kind of comes out through Melkor's rule set and takes some of it and says, okay, if we're going to go that way, then here's your new theme with some of those notes. And it's really that shall prove but mine instrument kind of idea, right? Where, if you're going to make your own idea, then okay, I'll just use that and we'll turn the music into that instead. So that's where the second theme comes in, and you can hear it kind of push through. But as we know, it kind of is immediately met by even more discord from Melkor. So we get even more of that clashing right away. It doesn't really even have time to say its piece before that new wave of even more intense discord happens. Now, finally, we get the third theme, and this one is really interesting because it comes in on really light, delicate flute. And if you are familiar with my other projects with The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, this theme is the Eucatastrophe theme. This is where this idea comes from. And it was fun to kind of retroactively bring it back into here and have that all kind of pieced together throughout the series. So this is the third theme. It's the Eucatastrophe theme. And this is where we really get a clash of this theme versus this just brazen clashing noise from Melkor. And I really wanted to get those trumpet sounds in there, just kind of trilling away at these notes that just don't really fit with the theme that Ilúvatar has given us. And it's very singular. It's very limited note choices now. Earlier on, Melkor was trying to write with this new collection of notes. And now it's not really even that. It's just, a solid wall of sound with very limited movement, very limited note collections, as the text even describes there. So that's the whole idea. It's almost just like a wall of sound that's happening and trying to crush this third theme down. And this is where we get the final phase of this beginning of the Ainulindäle and the end of this piece of music, where all of that brash and dissonant and clashing sound is happening. And through it, again, the Ilúvatar instrumentation pulls the most important notes from that brash, harsh, clashing sound and reiterates the Eucatastrophe melody with those notes instead. So it's kind of the inverse of what happened before, where Melkor was trying to pull away some of the other elements into his music. Now it's almost like that music that Melkor is playing has notes that are so strong and so brazen that when we take those notes and we play the main Eucatastrophe or the third theme here, if we play that theme based on those notes, then it starts to feel like this was what the music was intended to do anyways. So it kind of robs Melkor of that idea that he's trying to achieve, because, again, shall prove but by an instrument, it all kind of works out in the end. It all belongs, as long as you recontextualize the music, right? As long as you take that stuff that's brazen and harsh and add in some other notes that belong with it and kind of reiterate it, it becomes meaningful and it becomes, beautiful again. And that's kind of the whole beauty of this whole thing, is that musically we can recreate that by, pulling positive harmony, I guess we'll say, pleasant sounds from this simplistic idea. When Melkor is playing something so harsh and simple, it's actually really easy to add notation to that makes it warm, that makes it strong and powerful in a positive way, because that simplicity it doesn't have enough structure on its own. And so it can be really easily recontextualized, which I think is the whole kind of idea of what's going on in the Ainulindäle. So that's a little bit of a demo of, the journey through all of this. I hope you liked it. Don't worry too much if there was a lot there to kind of keep track of, because now what we're going to do is we're going to go through it all again with Andy Serkis's audiobook reading. And I want you to listen for all of those elements. I'll have the text up on screen so that you can look for those quotes and just try and listen through and see if you hear some of those elements. And instead of trying to think, theoretically about what the music theory terms and all that stuff is, just think about the idea of tension and release and, this group of notes and this group of notes pulling from each other and pushing, and try and see if you can imagine it that way, and see if you can hear those parts come through the music. I think it's a lot of fun and a fun experiment. So thanks so much for checking this out, and I'll have a little bit more afterwards to say, but for now, let's listen through the whole Ainulindäle from start to finish. Enjoy.
Ainulindäle. Ainulindäle. The music of the Ainur. There was Eru, the one who in Arda is called Ilúvatar, and he made first the Ainur, the holy ones, that were the offspring of his thought. And they were with him before aught else was made. And he spoke to them, propounding to them themes of music. And they sang before him, and he was glad. But for a long while they sang only each alone, or but few together, while the rest hearkened. For each comprehended only that part of the mind of Ilúvatar from which he came, and in the understanding of their brethren they grew but slowly. Yet ever as they listened they came to deeper understanding, and increased in unison and harmony. And it came to pass that Ilúvatar called together all the Ainur, and declared to them a mighty theme, unfolding to them things greater and more wonderful than he had yet revealed. And the glory of its beginning and the splendor of its end amazed the Ainur, so that they bowed before Ilúvatar and were silent. Then Ilúvatar said to them, "Of the theme that I have declared to you, I will now that ye make in harmony together a great music. And since I have kindled you with the flame imperishable, ye shall show forth your powers in adorning this theme, each with his own thoughts and devices, if he will. But I will sit and hearken, and be glad that through you great beauty has been wakened into song." Then the voices of the Ainur, like unto harps and lutes and pipes and trumpets and viols and organs, and like unto countless choirs singing with words, began to fashion the theme of Ilúvatar to a great music, and a sound arose of endless interchanging melodies woven in harmony that passed beyond hearing into the depths and into the heights, and the places of the dwelling of Ilúvatar were filled to overflowing, and the music and the echo of the music went out into the void, and it was not void. Never since have the Ainur made any music like to this music, though it has been said that a greater still shall be made before Ilúvatar by the choirs of the Ainur and the children of Ilúvatar after the end of days. Then the themes of Ilúvatar shall be played aright and take being in the moment of their utterance, for all shall then understand fully his intent in their part, and each shall know the comprehension of each, and Ilúvatar shall give to their thoughts the secret fire, being well pleased. But now Ilúvatar sat and hearkened, and for a great while it seemed good to him, for in the music there were no flaws. But as the theme progressed, it came into the heart of Melkor to interweave matters of his own imagining that were not in accord with the theme of Ilúvatar. For he sought therein to increase the power and glory of the part assigned to himself. To Melkor, among the Ainur, had been given the greatest gifts of power and knowledge, and he had a share in all the gifts of his brethren. He had gone often alone into the void places, seeking the imperishable flame. For desire grew hot within him, to bring into being things of his own, and it seemed to him that Iluvatar took no thought for the void, and he was impatient of its emptiness. Yet he found not the fire, for it is with Iluvatar. But being alone, he had begun to conceive thoughts of his own, unlike those of his brethren. Some of these thoughts he now wove into his music, and straightway discord arose about him, and many that sang nigh him grew despondent, and their thought was disturbed, and their music faltered. But some began to attune their music to his, rather than to the thought which they had at first. Then the discord of Melkor spread ever wider, and the melodies which had been heard before foundered in a sea of turbulent sound. But Iluvatar sat and hearkened until it seemed that about his throne there was a raging storm as of dark waters that made war one upon another in an endless wrath that would not be assuaged. Then Iluvatar arose, and the Ainur perceived that he smiled, and he lifted up his left hand, and a new theme began amid the storm, like and yet unlike to the former theme, and it gathered power and had new beauty. But the discord of Melkor rose in uproar and contended with it, and again there was a war of sound more violent than before, until many of the Ainur were dismayed and sang no longer, and Melkor had the mastery. Then again Iluvatar arose, and the Ainur perceived that his countenance was stern, and he lifted up his right hand, and behold, a third theme grew amid the confusion, and it was unlike the others. For it seemed at first soft and sweet, a mere rippling of gentle sounds in delicate melodies. But it could not be quenched, and it took to itself power and profundity. And it seemed at last that there were two musics progressing at one time before the seat of Iluvatar, and they were utterly at variance. The one was deep and wide and beautiful, but slow and blended with an immeasurable sorrow, from which its beauty chiefly came. The other had now achieved a unity of its own, but it was loud and vain and endlessly repeated, and it had little harmony, but rather a clamorous unison as of many trumpets braying upon a few notes. And it essayed to drown the other music by the violence of its voice, but it seemed that its most triumphant notes were taken by the other and woven into its own solemn pattern. In the midst of this strife, whereat the halls of Iluvatar shook, and a tremor ran out into the silences yet unmoved, Iluvatar arose a third time, and his face was terrible to behold. Then he raised up both his hands, and in one chord, deeper than the abyss, higher than the firmament, piercing as the light of the eye of Iluvatar, the music ceased.
I hope you enjoyed that. I have so many other projects that I've been working on. Like I said, I've got the Lord of the Rings done. I've got the Hobbit done, the Silmarillion done. I'm working on the Great Tales now. I've got the first 3 Wheel of Time books finished. I've got a Game of Thrones finished now, just really recently released that. And a lot of other stuff that I've been working on. The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, that's released. And I just Love doing these kind of projects. And I want to say a huge thank you to all the people on Patreon that really helped me to make this happen. There's a lot of fun stuff over there. We're doing a read through of The Lord of the Rings with the soundscape where everyone can kind of jump in and play a role. That's really been a lot of fun, and I'm excited to start getting those released. So a lot of ways that you can help me just continue to make these projects.